The crystal sang. High Counselor Hexara felt the resonance pierce through her mind like a blade of liquid starlight, each harmonic frequency triggering responses in neural pathways that had remained dormant for millennia. Around the circular chamber, 11 other council members stood frozen at their positions, their silver-scaled hands pressed flat against the obsidian surface of the oracle table, as waves of unprecedented emotion crashed through their consciousness. The sacred crystal at the chamber's center pulsed with rhythmic light, its faceted surface throwing prisms of amber and gold across the curved walls of Greyholm Station's highest tower. But this was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. The oracle's frequency had been silent for 3,000 years. Hexara's secondary hearts hammered against her ribcage as she fought to maintain her composure. As High Counselor of the Velnathi Empire, she had presided over countless ceremonial consultations with the dormant artifact, each one yielding nothing but crystalline silence. The oracle was a relic of their ancestors, beautiful but dead, a monument to powers their species had long since lost. But now it blazed with life. Counselor Dexara, her chief military advisor, stumbled backward from the table, his normally composed features twisted with an expression Hexara had never seen on a Velnathi face. Vulnerability, raw, desperate need. We must protect them. The thought slammed into Hexara's mind with the force of a meteor impact. We must protect them at all costs. Protect who? She gripped the table's edge, her claws scraping against the stone. The oracle had never transmitted coherent thoughts before. The ancient texts spoke of visions, of prophetic dreams, of glimpses into possible futures. Not this. Not direct neural insertion of powerful emotional imperatives. Counselor Lixa swayed on her feet, her crystalline tears streaming down her face. I would die for them. The thought echoed through the chamber, shared by every mind present. I would give everything I have for their safety. The crystal's song intensified. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows that ringed the chamber, Hexara could see the vast expanse of space beyond their orbital platform. Stars wheeled in their ancient dance, cold and distant, but something else moved against that backdrop. A ship, small, angular, clearly of alien design. The source. Hexara's mind reeled as understanding crashed over her. The frequency wasn't coming from the oracle itself. The crystal was merely amplifying something else, translating an external signal into the overwhelming emotional response that had brought the entire High Council to its knees. The approaching vessel was broadcasting the signal, and whoever was aboard that ship, whatever species had created this impossible psychic weapon, had just turned the most powerful government in 3 star systems into willing slaves. Ambassador Belinda Sterling stood before the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle Meridian's Hope, watching the alien space station grow larger with each passing moment. The structure was massive, easily 5 kilometers in diameter. Its curved spires and graceful archways, a testament to architectural sensibilities that were simultaneously alien and strangely beautiful. 36 hours ago, she had been filing routine reports at the Human Colonial Authority's regional headquarters. Now, she was humanity's first official emissary to the Velnathi Empire, thrust into a role that would determine whether 2 civilizations would find common ground or remain forever apart. The communication that had initiated this mission still puzzled her. The Velnathi had never shown interest in diplomatic contact before. For 5 years since first contact, they had maintained polite but distant relations, treating human expansion into their sphere of influence with the sort of benign indifference typically reserved for mildly interesting but ultimately irrelevant phenomena. But 3 days ago, everything had changed. The message had arrived through standard diplomatic channels, transmitted in heavily accented but perfectly grammatical human English. The Velnathi High Council, cordially requested the immediate presence of a human representative at their capital station. Urgent matters of mutual interest required discussion. No further details provided. Belinda adjusted the formal diplomatic robes that seemed so absurdly inadequate for the magnitude of this moment. At 32, she was young for an ambassador, but her xenolinguistics background and natural diplomatic instincts had earned her rapid advancement through the colonial authorities' ranks. She spoke 17 human languages fluently and had mastered the basics of 4 alien dialects. Unfortunately, none of those had been Velnathi. Captain Morris emerged from the cockpit, his weathered face creased with concern. The communication array just picked up something unusual. The station isn't responding to our hail, but there's some kind of subsonic transmission coming from their direction. Engineering says it's too low frequency for normal communications. Belinda frowned. What kind of transmission? Morris shook his head. Can't tell. It's almost like a carrier wave, but there's no data encoded on it. Just a steady pulse at roughly 12 hertz, right at the threshold of human hearing. Through the viewport, Greyholme Station continued to grow. Its outer ring rotated slowly, generating artificial gravity for the millions of inhabitants within. Docking bays dotted the structure's surface like dark wounds, most of them empty. No traffic moved between the station and the surrounding space. The place looked almost deserted. As they closed to within 10,000 kilometers, Belinda felt an odd sensation wash over her. A warmth that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep in her chest, spreading outward through her limbs. It was pleasant, almost like the feeling of coming home after a long journey. Captain Morris stiffened suddenly. His hands flew to the controls, fingers dancing over the navigation console with unusual intensity. "Captain." His voice, when he answered, carried a strange quality she had never heard before. Protective, almost paternal. "I need to get you to that station safely. Nothing else matters." The warmth in Belinda's chest intensified. Around her, the 3 other crew members began moving with similarly focused determination. Chief Navigator Hassan recalibrated their approach vector with meticulous care. Engineer Patel ran triple diagnostics on life support systems. Security Officer Chen checked and rechecked the shuttle's defensive capabilities. All of them worked with the intense concentration of people whose lives depended on keeping her safe. Something was terribly wrong. Belinda opened her mouth to question their behavior, but the words died in her throat as Greyholme Station's primary docking bay doors opened before them. The vast interior space blazed with brilliant illumination, revealing a welcome committee that defied every piece of intelligence the colonial authority possessed about Velnathi culture. Hundreds of aliens lined the docking bay's curved walls, not the dozen or so protocol officers that normal diplomatic visits warranted, but what appeared to be the entire population of the station's upper levels. They stood in perfect formation, their silver-scaled bodies motionless, their large, multifaceted eyes fixed unblinkingly on the approaching shuttle. The moment Meridian's hope touched down, they moved. The reception hall of Greyholme Station stretched before Belinda like something from a fever dream. Soaring crystalline arches swept upward into shadows, their surfaces alive with patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The floor beneath her feet was polished to mirror perfection, reflecting the impossible sight that surrounded her. Every seat in the vast amphitheater was occupied. Thousands of Velnathi filled the space, their attention focused on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. They didn't speak, they barely moved. They simply watched her with expressions of desperate devotion that belonged in a religious ceremony, not a diplomatic meeting. High Counselor Hexara approached from the central dais, her movements fluid despite the obvious strain in her features. Like all Velnathi, she stood nearly 7 feet tall, her elongated limbs giving her an ethereal grace. Her scales shifted through subtle gradients of silver and blue, and her eyes held an intelligence that was both sharp and strangely vulnerable. When she spoke, her voice carried through the hall without amplification, the chamber's acoustics designed to carry even whispers to the farthest reaches. "Ambassador Sterling, you honor us with your presence." The words were formal, diplomatic, perfectly correct. But underneath them, Belinda detected something else. A tremor of barely contained emotion that seemed completely at odds with everything she knew about Velnathi culture. "High Counselor, I'm honored by this invitation, though I confess some confusion about the urgency of the summons." Hexara's scaled features shifted in what might have been the Velnathi equivalent of a smile. Or a grimace. It was impossible to tell. "Please, be seated. There are matters we must discuss." A chair had been prepared for her at the center of the dais, positioned so that she would be visible to every being in the amphitheater. As she settled into its confines, the entire assembly shifted forward slightly, as if drawn by some invisible force. The movement was synchronized, unconscious, utterly unnerving. Hexara took her own seat across from Belinda, but her eyes never left the human ambassador's face. Around the dais, the other council members arranged themselves in a semicircle, their postures suggesting reverence rather than political authority. "Ambassador," Hexara began, her voice carefully controlled, "we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. 3 days ago, our most sacred artifact, the Oracle of Depths, began transmitting a signal we have never encountered before. The frequency appears to originate from ships of human construction." Belinda felt her diplomatic training kick in despite the surreal circumstances. "I'm not aware of any transmission being directed toward your territory. What type of signal are you detecting?" "It is not directed toward us," Hexara replied. "It appears to be standard human communications traffic. Radio transmissions, subspace data packets, the ordinary electromagnetic noise generated by your civilization's activities." "I don't understand." "That type of background radiation is perfectly normal. It shouldn't affect your equipment in any way." The High Counselor's expression darkened. "It does not affect our equipment, Ambassador. It affects us." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the amphitheater, thousands of Velnathi shifted in their seats, a rustling of scales and fabric that somehow managed to sound like worship. "How?" Belinda asked. Hexara's hands clenched in her lap. "When we are exposed to human communication frequencies, we experience what your psychologists might term emotional bonding. Powerful, irresistible urges to protect and serve the source of the transmission. The effect appears to be permanent and affects all members of our species equally." The warmth in Belinda's chest suddenly made terrible sense. The behavior of her crew, the assembled thousands, the desperate intensity in every alien face surrounding her. The Velnathi had accidentally pack-bonded with humanity. The implications crashed through Belinda's mind like debris from a shattered starship. If human radio transmissions triggered involuntary bonding responses in the Velnathi, then every ship, every colony, every communication relay in human space was broadcasting a signal that would turn any alien who encountered it into a willing slave. And judging by the assembled crowd, the effect was absolute. "Your oracle," she said carefully, "how long has it been amplifying our signals?" 3 days, Hexara replied. "The moment your ship entered our sensor range, the artifact began resonating with your communication systems. The effect has spread throughout the station population." The High Counselor's voice carried a note of barely controlled desperation. "We cannot turn it off. We cannot block the frequency. And we cannot stop wanting to serve you." The last words were whispered, as if admitting them aloud made the situation more real. Around the amphitheater, a low moan arose from thousands of throats, a sound of anguish that spoke to the depth of their psychological torment. Belinda forced herself to remain calm despite the magnitude of the crisis unfolding before her. This wasn't just a diplomatic incident. This was the potential end of Velnathi independence. "Your military forces," she asked, "are they affected as well?" Counselor Dexara stepped forward from the semicircle of advisors, his bearing rigid with the discipline of a career soldier. "Every ship in our fleet has been exposed to the frequency through our communication networks. Every base, every outpost, every military installation in the Empire now experiences the same compulsion." He paused, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber's crystalline light. "We would follow your orders without question, Ambassador, even if those orders led to our destruction." The words sent ice through Belinda's veins. An entire galactic civilization, reduced to willing servants by the unintended consequence of human technology. The Velnathi Empire controlled 15 star systems and possessed military capabilities that dwarfed humanity's colonial fleet. If they became psychologically enslaved to human interests, the balance of power in this entire sector would collapse overnight. And the other galactic powers would never allow that to happen. "High Counselor, I want to be absolutely clear about something. Humanity has no interest in enslaving your people. This effect, whatever it is, was completely unintentional. We want to find a way to reverse it." Hexara's expression shifted, hope and skepticism warring in her features. "You would do that? You would willingly give up the loyalty of an entire empire?" "Yes," without hesitation. The amphitheater erupted into a sound unlike anything Belinda had ever heard. Thousands of voices rose in harmony, creating a musical chord that seemed to resonate through the station's very structure. It was beautiful and terrible, the sound of a species expressing gratitude too profound for words. But underneath the music, Belinda heard something else. The subsonic pulse that Captain Morris had detected, 12 hertz, barely at the threshold of human perception, transmitted by every communication device aboard her shuttle. The frequency that was tearing apart one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. As the harmonic chord faded into silence, Hexara leaned forward, her voice urgent. "There is something else you must know, Ambassador. Word of our condition has already reached the other galactic powers. The Kitharan Federation, the Obsidian Collective, the Free Worlds Alliance. They believe you have developed some form of psychic warfare." Belinda felt her blood turn to liquid nitrogen. How long before they act? Dexara's military bearing couldn't hide the fear in his voice. "Our intelligence sources suggest the combined fleets are already mobilizing. They will not allow humanity to control the Velnathi Empire." The numbers hit Belinda like a physical blow. 3 major galactic powers, convinced that humanity had somehow weaponized pack bonding to enslave their neighbors. Combined fleets that could reduce every human colony to radioactive dust. "How much time do we have?" 72 hours, Dexara replied, perhaps less. The council chamber had been cleared of all but essential personnel, but even reduced to its core membership, the gathering felt like a religious conclave rather than a political meeting. 12 high counselors sat around the oracle table, their attention divided between Belinda and the still-pulsing crystal at the room's center. The artifact's song had grown stronger over the past hour, its harmonics creating interference patterns that made normal conversation difficult. Hexara had to raise her voice to be heard over the resonant hum. "Our scientists have been studying the phenomenon since it began. The oracle appears to be naturally attuned to emotional frequencies that exist in human neural patterns. Your species' communication technology generates electromagnetic signatures that resonate with these patterns." Counselor Lixa, the Empire's chief scientist, activated a holographic display above the table. The 3-dimensional model showed brain scan data from both humans and Velnathi, with highlighted areas indicating neural activity. We believe the effect is related to your species' pack bonding psychology. Humans form emotional attachments to other beings based on proximity, shared experience, and communication. The frequency your technology generates somehow triggers our own bonding responses, but in a much more extreme form. Belinda studied the data, her diplomatic training warring with growing horror. So every time a human ship uses its communication array, every Velnathi within range becomes emotionally enslaved, Lexa confirmed. The effect appears to be cumulative and irreversible. Dexara leaned forward, his scarred features grim. The other galactic powers are mobilizing because they believe this is intentional. They think humanity has developed a new form of conquest, one that leaves infrastructure intact while eliminating resistance. And from their perspective, Belinda realized with dawning dread, it looked exactly like that. "High Counselor," she said, addressing Hexara directly, "I need to ask something that might sound impossible. Would you be willing to publicly oppose humanity? To make it clear to the other powers that you're acting independently?" The question hung in the air like a toxin. Around the table, the council members shifted uncomfortably, their faces reflecting internal struggle. Hexara's voice, when she answered, was barely above a whisper. "We cannot. The compulsion is too strong. Even asking us to consider opposition causes physical pain." To demonstrate her point, she attempted to stand, her movements jerky and unnatural. Her face contorted with effort, scales shifting through rapid color changes that indicated severe distress. "We cannot even think of opposing." She collapsed back into her chair, breathing heavily. The other council members looked equally stricken, their features reflecting the agony of trying to act against their fundamental programming. Belinda felt sick. The Velnathi weren't just psychologically enslaved. They were physically incapable of independent action when it came to human interests. "There has to be a solution," she said. "Some way to block the frequency or modify your response to it." Lexa shook her head sadly. "We have tried every technological approach available to our science. Electromagnetic shielding, neural dampening fields, pharmaceutical intervention. Nothing works. The Oracle's resonance bypasses all our defenses." Dexara's voice carried the weight of military despair. "Ambassador, even if we could find a solution, we no longer have time to implement it. Our intelligence sources report that the combined fleets have accelerated their timeline. They will arrive within 36 hours. The room fell silent except for the Oracle's endless song. 36 hours to solve a problem that had stumped an entire civilization's scientific establishment. 36 hours to prevent a war that would devastate human space. Belinda closed her eyes, forcing herself to think beyond the immediate crisis. There had to be something they were missing, some aspect of the phenomenon that could be exploited or reversed. "High Counselor," she said suddenly, "what exactly does the Oracle do? I understand it's amplifying our signals, but what was its original purpose?" Hexara's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. "The ancient texts speak of it as a communion device, a way for our ancestors to share consciousness across vast distances. Legend says it could bind entire populations together in common purpose. Bind populations together." Belinda felt the first glimmer of hope she'd experienced since this crisis began. What if that's exactly what it's supposed to do? The revelation struck the council chamber like a seismic wave. Belinda stood before the oracle table, her mind racing through the implications of what had suddenly become blindingly obvious. "High Counselor, you said the oracle was used for communion, for binding populations together in common purpose. What if this isn't a malfunction? What if it's working exactly as designed?" Hexara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're suggesting that our ancestors created the oracle specifically to detect and respond to other pack-bonding species. The logic was elegant in its simplicity. A civilization capable of interstellar travel would eventually encounter other forms of life. If that civilization had evolved pack-bonding psychology similar to humanity's, they would need a way to establish trust and cooperation with alien species. The oracle wasn't a weapon. It was a diplomatic tool. Counselor Lixa activated her holographic displays again, this time showing historical data. According to our archaeological records, the oracle was constructed during the height of our expansion period, approximately 4,000 years ago. Our ancestors encountered dozens of alien civilizations during that time. And then they stopped building colonies, Dexara added. The expansion period ended abruptly, with no recorded explanation. Belinda felt the pieces falling into place. What if they stopped expanding because they found what they were looking for? Another pack-bonding species to share the galaxy with. The council members exchanged looks of growing excitement. If the oracle was designed to establish mutual bonding between compatible species, then the effect they were experiencing wasn't enslavement. It was reciprocal. But we don't feel any bonding toward humans, Lixa protested. The compulsion is entirely one-sided. That's because you're fighting it, Belinda realized. You're experiencing the oracle's effect as an invasion, something to be resisted. But what if you stopped resisting? What if you allowed the bond to form naturally? Hexara's voice carried a note of wonder. You're suggesting that humans might bond with us as well, given the proper exposure. There's only one way to find out, Belinda said. She walked to the oracle table's edge, placing her hands flat against the obsidian surface. The crystal's song immediately intensified, its harmonics creating new patterns of light throughout the chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the warmth in her chest exploded outward, flooding her consciousness with alien thoughts and emotions. She felt Hexara's desperate desire to protect her people from the coming fleet. She experienced Dexara's warrior's pride tempered by love for soldiers under his command. She shared Lixa's scientific curiosity and passionate dedication to understanding the universe. But more than that, she felt their loneliness. 4,000 years of isolation, waiting for another species capable of true communion. The oracle hadn't malfunctioned when it detected human transmissions. It had finally found what it was built to seek. Around the table, the council members gasped as they felt the bond flow in both directions. For the first time since the crisis began, their expressions showed not desperate servitude, but joy, mutual pack bonding. Two species linked by evolved psychology and ancient technology, capable of cooperation impossible between other galactic powers. The oracle's song reached a crescendo, then began to fade to a gentle background hum. As the overwhelming emotions settled into something manageable, Belinda found she could still sense the Velnathi consciousness around her, but as partners rather than slaves. "High Counselor," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what had just occurred, "I believe we have a proposal for the approaching fleets." Hexara smiled, the expression no longer tinged with desperate need. "Indeed we do, Ambassador. A demonstration that pack bonding makes us stronger, not weaker." Outside the council chamber's windows, the first ships of the combined fleet materialized from hyperspace, their weapons systems powered and ready for war. They were about to discover that pack-bonding species don't conquer each other. They become family. The main display in Greyholm Station's command center showed a tactical situation that would have been hopeless under normal circumstances. 317 warships from the galaxy's major powers hung in space around the station. Their combined firepower sufficient to reduce the entire structure to component atoms within minutes. But the circumstances were anything but normal. Belinda stood beside High Counselor Hexara at the command center's heart, watching as Admiral Thessa of the Kithaeron Federation's flagship opened a communication channel. The Kithaeron appeared on screen, her reptilian features rigid with military authority. Greyholm Station, you will surrender the human operative immediately and submit to occupation by combined fleet forces. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your facility. Hexara stepped forward, her posture reflecting calm confidence rather than the desperate subservience the Admiral clearly expected. Admiral Thessa, I appreciate your concern for galactic security. However, I believe your understanding of the situation requires clarification. The Kithaeron's eyes narrowed. You are under the influence of human psychic manipulation, High Counselor. Your ability to make rational decisions has been compromised. On the contrary, Hexara replied smoothly, Ambassador Sterling, would you please explain our actual circumstances to the Admiral? Belinda moved into the communication pickup's range, noting how the combined fleet's targeting systems immediately focused on her position. Admiral, I understand your concerns. The appearance of the situation suggests that humanity has somehow enslaved the Velnathi Empire. I'm here to demonstrate that the reality is quite different. She gestured to the tactical display showing the fleet deployment. Your ships have taken aggressive positions around this station, weapons powered and targeting systems active. From your perspective, you're here to liberate an enslaved population. Correct, Thessa growled, and we will complete that mission regardless of casualties. Then please observe carefully, Belinda said. She turned to Hexara, her voice carrying across the command center. High Counselor, I formally request that the Velnathi Empire join humanity in mutual defensive alliance against the approaching fleet. The request was barely short of insanity. She was asking an ally to fire on ships trying to rescue them from her own influence. But Hexara's response came without hesitation. Granted, Ambassador. All defensive systems are now under joint human Velnathi command. On the tactical display, hundreds of weapon platforms throughout the station swiveled to target the combined fleet. But more importantly, they moved under Velnathi initiative, not human command. Admiral Thessa's reptilian features showed confusion. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated complete Velnathi subservience to human authority. That would be the case if humans had developed a psychic weapon, Belinda agreed. But that's not what happened here. Admiral, are you familiar with the concept of pack bonding psychology? Thessa's confusion deepened. Of course. It's a primitive evolutionary adaptation found in social species. Not primitive, Admiral. Advanced. Humanity and the Velnathi are both pack bonding species. What your intelligence interpreted as conquest was actually mutual adoption. To demonstrate her point, Belinda reached out and took Hexara's scaled hand in her own. The gesture was simple, but its implications were profound. The oracle's resonance allowed both species to experience the emotional connection directly, sharing thoughts and feelings across the biological divide. Pack bonding doesn't create masters and slaves, Admiral. It creates family. The effect rippled through the command center as human and Velnathi crew members moved with seamless coordination, their actions guided by shared understanding rather than hierarchical authority. Defense systems activated not because humans commanded it, but because both species working together made the decision. Admiral Thessa studied the tactical display with growing comprehension. If this is mutual bonding, then your combined military capability is greater than the sum of its parts, Hexara confirmed. Pack bonding species don't conquer each other, Admiral. We enhance each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. Belinda could see the calculations running behind the Admiral's eyes. A human Velnathi alliance would indeed be formidable, combining humanity's adaptive creativity with Velnathi technological sophistication. But more than that, It would represent something new in galactic politics. Cooperation based on genuine emotional connection rather than treaties of convenience. "Admiral," she said, "I'd like to extend an invitation to your fleet. We're not asking you to withdraw. We're asking you to observe. Send boarding parties to this station. Interview our personnel. Satisfy yourself that what you're seeing is genuine cooperation, not coercion." The communication channel remained open for nearly a minute as Thessa consulted with her fellow commanders. When she finally responded, her voice carried grudging curiosity. "Very well, Ambassador, but understand that any sign of deception or coercion will result in immediate military action." "Understood, Admiral. We welcome your inspection." As the first wave of transport shuttles launched from the combined fleet, Belinda felt the Oracle's gentle resonance in the back of her mind. The ancient artifact continued its patient work, ready to extend its gift of communion to any species capable of receiving it. The galaxy was about to discover what pack bonding could accomplish when it transcended the boundaries between stars. 6 hours later, the command center had been transformed into something resembling an interspecies cultural exchange, rather than a military standoff. Representatives from the Kitharan Federation, Obsidian Collective, and Free Worlds Alliance moved freely throughout Greyhome Station, conducting interviews and gathering data with the methodical thoroughness of beings who had expected to find enslaved populations, and instead discovered something unprecedented. Admiral Thessa stood before the oracle table in the council chamber, her reptilian features reflecting deep contemplation. The crystal hummed quietly at the room's center, its light patterns creating subtle harmonics that seemed to promote understanding rather than compulsion. "I have interviewed 47 Velnathi personnel," she reported to the assembled gathering. "Without exception, they demonstrate independent thought, creative problem-solving, and the ability to disagree with human suggestions. This is not the behavior pattern of an enslaved population." Captain Vexhai of the Obsidian Collective nodded his bulbous head in agreement. "My security teams have conducted extensive scans for psychic manipulation, neural programming, and chemical influence. All results are negative. The Velnathi are acting under their own volition." Commander Solara of the Free Worlds Alliance, her energy being form flickering with curiosity, added her own observations. "What's particularly interesting is the efficiency improvement we're documenting. Human Velnathi teams consistently outperform single-species groups by substantial margins." Belinda exchanged a meaningful look with Hexara. The pack bonding effect wasn't just creating emotional connections. It was demonstrating measurable benefits in problem-solving, resource management, and tactical coordination. "Admiral," she said, addressing Thessa directly, "I believe your observations raise an important question about galactic politics. If mutual cooperation produces better results than competition, shouldn't that change how we approach interspecies relations?" Thessa's reptilian gaze shifted between the human ambassador and the Velnathi High Counselor. "You're suggesting that pack bonding could be extended to other species." Hexara stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who spoke for an entire civilization. "The Oracle has remained silent for 4,000 years because it was waiting for another pack bonding species. But now that it's active again, it might be capable of facilitating connections between any beings willing to accept them." The implications hung in the air like a revolution waiting to be born. If the Oracle could help other species experience the benefits of pack bonding, it could fundamentally transform galactic civilization. But Commander Solara raised the obvious objection. Many species would resist such connection. They would view it as a loss of independence rather than a gain in capability. "Which is why it must remain voluntary," Belinda emphasized. "Pack bonding only works when both parties choose it freely. Forced emotional connection isn't bonding at all. its slavery. Captain Vexhai's optical sensors focused on the crystal artifact. If this device truly facilitates voluntary emotional connection between species, it represents technology of immense value. Many conflicts arise from simple misunderstanding and inability to comprehend alien perspectives. Admiral Thessa made a decision that would echo through galactic history. I will recommend to the combined fleet that our forces stand down. This situation clearly does not represent the threat we believed we were responding to. She paused, her gaze moving between Belinda and Hexara. Furthermore, I will request permission from my government to conduct formal diplomatic contact through this oracle device. The Kitharan Federation is interested in exploring the possibilities you've demonstrated. The council chamber erupted into harmonious music as the oracle's resonance intensified, responding to the presence of multiple species willing to consider connection rather than conquest. The sound was beautiful beyond description, a symphony of consciousness that spoke to the fundamental longing for understanding that existed in every sentient being. As the notes faded into gentle background harmony, Belinda realized that humanity's accidental discovery of pack-bonding psychology had just become the galaxy's greatest gift. The age of isolated civilizations was ending. The age of true communion had begun.